Now, Melquist had a tendency, like his MO was, and in the case of Bonnie Lee Scott, he killed Bonnie and then went home and thought he dreamed the whole thing, so he went back to the body to confirm to himself that he actually did murder somebody and that he didn't dream the whole thing. And then he went back a week after that, or 2 weeks after that, to what he said, bury the body. And he brought a knife and a shovel, and basically when he saw the body, he cut Bonnie Lee Scott's head off and tossed it in the bushes, and then used a knife to start stabbing the torso. Now, if the only thing, and of course people get more and more violent, as they commit more crimes and get away with more. But with the Grimes case, if he in fact had this garden fork and had gone back to the bodies a week after he left them there, they would have been frozen solid. And he wouldn't have had the same, Bonnie's body was from September to November, so it was actually decaying and it wasn't frozen. With the girls, if you were to use this garden fork that they found in the trunk of his car, on one of the girls, Petey was on top when she was late. So if he used this thing to try to get the same jollies that he got out of cutting up Bonnie Lee Scott, it wouldn't have punctured very far because, as you know, if you've ever tried to cut into a frozen side of beef, you don't get very far. So I think he would have given up after one. So that kind of matched, his kind of MO, and they can never account for the 3 puncture wounds.
Yeah, the whole thing's weird as hell. I mean, like, every bit of it. So with Melquist, what do you think his actual motive was? That he was just a sick, deranged individual?
I think he was a very sick, deranged individual, but I don't know if he actually set out to murder the girls. I don't think it was a planned type of thing. I think it was a comedy, not a comedy, but just all the bad things kind of came together that night, and I think that maybe it would have rendered him unconscious, and maybe whoever else he was with kind of freaked out and thought they were dead, and they got rid of, they dumped him out of the car and just never talked about it again. So, in effect, I think they may have frozen to death. And I don't think it was intentional. I don't think it was an intentional hit. Melquist had a tendency to get to know women. It wasn't like he just picked women at random. He would start with a dating relationship with all of them. So he actually got to know his victims, as opposed to just picking up 2 girls he was unfamiliar with and killing them. So that wasn't his thing. But it may have been. I still think there was a local group of guys involved that I think were involved that figured into it, but I don't think anyone set out that night to murder the Grimes sisters. I don't think it was an intentional first-degree type of thing. I think everything went bad, and unfortunately 2 girls ended up dead.
Before you came on, I said this was kind of your pet project, and then I changed my wording, and I said this was more like a labor of love, and that's kind of what I feel like it's been for you. Talk a little bit about, the work you've done on it beyond, just the phone calls and things like that, because you've done a lot of things to really bring this to the forefront. Again.
Yeah, it wasn't until actually I got a chance to meet the living, siblings of the girls, and they actually sought me out. I didn't want to bother them or anything like that. I figured, they would probably read something that I wrote, and if they wanted to reach out, they could, and I would never, impress anything on them. And they did. They reached out. I actually met with their brother Jim and kind of discussed, I wanted to get a better feel for what the girls were like, and then it became kind of, more like a labor of love, like you said, because then, you see how it affected the family. You see what the family has gone through, and now it's going on 61 years now. And so I constantly get emails and phone calls and Facebook messages from people that try to add a little bit more to the story, and maybe have a little bit of information, but yeah, I'm still reaching out to people, and people are still providing information, and I do believe, I sincerely believe that in the next I don't want to make any predictions or jinx anything, but I think in the next year or so, I think we'll be pretty close to figuring out what happened.
Hey, question for you. You touched on it briefly, but in what way did the fact that Melquist, I mean, I assume because nobody could question him at that point, but in what way did him being deceased or not deceased at various times when you're looking into it, change or alter the way that things were going on with the case for you?
Well, I couldn't mention, when he was alive, I didn't want to mention his name necessarily because I didn't want him to know that somebody was still looking at it. I wanted to go to the authorities first and let them, and in fact, when he had admitted, confessed to the Bonnie Lee Scott case, he confessed pretty readily once they put him on a polygraph. And so when I met with these guys, I was like, I think if you guys just show up at his, I don't know what shape he's in, I don't know if, mentally what shape he's in, I don't know physically what shape he's in, but my gut feeling is that if you just show up at his place, show him your badges and say, hey, we'd like to talk to you about the Grimes girls, I think you would probably, just his first reaction would speak volumes, because I think he probably thought people had forgotten about it as well. Now, they weren't opposed to doing that, but they did say that they wanted to get a search warrant for DNA before they would do anything, just in case. He basically told them to pound sand. So at that point, I think they believed that there was. I mean, I can only suspect, and they weren't going to share a whole lot because it was still an open case. But just that statement would make me, believe that they thought there was still some evidence that might contain DNA, and so therefore they'd like to get a search warrant for this guy's DNA before they approached him. And then, unfortunately, within a month after our conversation, he passed away. And he was cremated, so they won't be getting any DNA from him necessarily. So yeah, that figured into when I come across Melquist, I didn't want to put that in the book. I did follow up after Melquist died in the second book, Chicago History of the Stranger Side, with a chapter on Melquist, and I kind of left it as a question. Could this be the voice of the Grimes sisters' killer? And then kind of went in a little more detail about Melquist and what the similarities were and some of the weird coincidences. Now, I know that when they did a search warrant on his house, they did find a little black book of different women they'd been in contact with, and two of them lived very close to the Grimes sisters, which is a little odd because he was from Villa Park. And so that was always a thing for me, is why would a guy who lives in Villa Park be hanging out in McKinley Park when he has so many more potential victims so much closer to home? I mean, Bonnie Lee Scott lived in Addison, which is right next door to Villa Park. Why would he be in McKinley Park? What would be his reason for being there? And that kind of always haunted me. That's the thing that I couldn't really get over, and that's the thing that I've been looking at to try to get a reason, or someone who saw him in the area, or someone who knew him and knew him to hang out in those areas. But then he actually became a suspect pretty fast in the Grimes case because of that little black book and the fact that two neighbors of the Grimes girls, not really close neighbors within, a couple blocks, but they were from the McKinley Park neighborhood, he had numbers for. And the girls were contacted, but they had no idea why Melquist would have their numbers at all. And so both girls were interviewed by the police, and both of them said they had no contact at all with Melquist, and they had no idea why he would have their phone numbers. So at some point, I think he was in the area for whatever reason, and I'm still trying to nail that down as to why he would have been in the McKinley Park area.
Yeah, there's just so many loose ends to the whole thing. You got to tie every little thing up just to make it work. And that's one of the things that you look at with like the Zodiac case. It's like, oh, everything fits until you get into the handwriting, or everything fits until you get into the physical evidence.
Right, and you can't overlook that. I mean, everyone has their favorite suspects or whatnot, but I'm not even saying that I'm sure he did it. I'm just saying he's just another good suspect. And that, and that you got to connect all the dots. If one thing doesn't fit, then it's not. You want to take it where the evidence takes you. You want it to take the investigation where the evidence takes it. You don't want to try to make the evidence fit the investigation, and that's where an investigation will fall apart. And that's what happened with Benny Bedwell, and that's what happens with a lot of cases, is that investigators tend to get tunnel vision and don't look beyond who they believe did it, and you lose a lot of time and resources, and witnesses die off, and so you have to kind of keep an open mind, even though, like I say, he might be my favorite suspect. He wasn't the only one involved. There were definitely other people involved. So, and it's trying to, once those people are identified, then you got to try to make the link. If you think these people were involved along with Melquist, why were they together? What was the common thread that ran between the group? Or, there was other theories about it being just a prank. It made the newspaper that someone had reported that it was just a prank, that the girls were left out of the car alive, but naked. Drive them out there, force them out of the car naked, and drive away, and everyone gets a great laugh. Now, I don't personally think that's very funny, and it was probably, I don't see what the idea would be. Now, there was in the newspaper article I had read that said that, it was a prank, but then when the people that were playing the prank went back to where they thought they left the girls, they couldn't find them. But again, that wouldn't hold any weight, because if these girls are alive and conscious and moving and able to move, even if they were shy, the thought of dying tends to get you beyond the shyness. And they could have walked to a home that was nearby. They wouldn't have had to walk very far. But the thing was that if you walk in bare feet, especially in the cold, you step on things, you cut your feet, you wouldn't even feel it because your feet are basically freezing. But there were no marks whatsoever on the girls' feet. They were perfectly clean. There weren't any scrapes or cuts or anything like that. Plus, you go back to they died within 4 hours of having dinner, so it would have taken at least 10 hours in those temperatures to cause someone to pass out or die from hypothermia. So if that was the case, then the digestive process would have been a lot further along than what it was. So, and that's, I think, the big thing why they pointed to a homicide rather than an accidental death, is because they died within 4 hours of eating their last meal. They wouldn't have froze to death in 4 hours. So something happened. Either they were left unconscious, which would indicate murder, and they would have froze faster, or the whole freezer theory and everything else would figure in. So that's why they pointed to homicide, even though they couldn't point to a cause of death other than exposure. So
I tell you what, Ray, again, I love talking to you about all the other Chicago cases, but I'm really glad we got to do this one. Talk about the group that you have on Facebook. And,
sure.
By the way, I have to laugh about something real quick. On YouTube,
sure,
there's this. I just have to laugh real quick because there's this guy on YouTube that commented on one of your videos. It said you guys are all anti-Semite and won't let them in the group. I was like, what?
Oh, yeah, I saw that too. Yeah, that guy's. We call those people crazy.
He seemed like more than that, but yeah.
It's completely crazy. Like, that guy should not own a firearm. First of all, just that comment alone. But I've seen that comment. I remember when all that was going. That's basically his go-to. I've seen him, try to get into other groups too and blame them for being anti-Semitic. Like, I don't know if he was. How are we supposed to know he's Jewish? I mean, I don't get it. But anyway, so the Facebook group is that is funny. But the Facebook group is called Help Solve the Grimes Sisters Murder, and it's a closed group, so people can request to become members. The last time I looked, it was roughly a little over 1,500 members, and there's all sorts of people on there. There's the families on there. There's different family members, cousins, relatives of the Grimes family, people who were pallbearers, people who were friends of the girls. people who are neighbors of the girls, former and current law enforcement are on there. So